I'm only dating him for the green card. Americans are so gullible. My girlfriend posted on Instagram Live. Her coworker was filming for Instagram. Saw the video. She was deported before she could explain. I testified at her hearing that she had admitted to marriage fraud, and she's banned from returning for 10 years. Okay, Reddit. Fasten your seatbelt. I never imagined that I would be the person writing one of these lengthy, convoluted morality tales with a federal agency cameo and a comment section that would undoubtedly be split 50-50 between "you're a snitch" and "you did the right thing." However, here I am. I work in the Midwest as a 31-year-old male engineer. For 5 years, I've lived in the same flat. I keep forgetting to water 2 succulents and a calendar that is dependent on Outlook invites. We'll refer to my ex-girlfriend, who was 27F, as Lean. Costa Rican, was terrifyingly skilled at Wordle, could transform a $12 thrift shop garment into runway material, and laughed with her entire face. After I ended my last relationship, we met at a coffee shop. She had her hair up in a clip like a punctuation mark, earbuds in, and was sketching storefronts with ink at the corner table. What was she drawing? I asked. She replied, "A place I'm not homesick in." I was gone within 5 minutes. She was here on OPT after earning a master's degree in design, and I knew nothing more about visas than there are paperwork mazes and lines at embassies. Translation: there was a clock, but she could work. The clock was something she detested. She excelled in passive cooling techniques, facade studies, and drilling holes in foam core at 3 in the morning. However, beneath all that assurance, there lurked a living anxiety. It had nothing to do with me or a disagreement when she sobbed in front of me for the first time. An envelope bearing her father's handwriting showed up at the post office 6 weeks after it was supposed to. She gripped the paper as if it were painful to come into contact with something that had crossed oceans to reach her. I'm not a moron. I am aware of the cliché. Green card jokes, a foreign girlfriend, and an American man. At first, we also made jokes. I would respond, "You mean my dental plan?" when she said, "If I marry you, it's only for your Costco membership." However, beneath the humor lurked seriousness. By the 8th month, we were sharing bed space, food, and the kind of disagreements that only come about when you're already envisioning the same future. In our relationship, the stress of immigration was a constant source of background noise. When she checked the news regarding policy changes, she would get panic episodes. At 2 in the morning, I would locate her. Reading forms on which people told terrifying tales of rejections and delays. Every document she had ever gotten from USCIS was preserved in a folder with color-coded tabs arranged by date. She would remain silent when others complained about their jobs, since she was aware of how soon employment may result in deportation. Her buddies were dispersed over comparable circumstances. A few had secured corporate sponsors. Others had wed citizens of the United States. Some had given up and returned home. There was an unseen network of people who shared updates about processing delays, compared attorneys, and lived on borrowed time. After their coffee dates, Lean would appear as though she had attended a support group for individuals with terminal illness. She was instantly well-liked by my family. This one won't break your heart, according to my mom, who noted she had wonderful energy. She remembered specifics from earlier discussions and offered insightful questions about his profession, which my dad valued. She always knew exactly how to fold the napkins back the way my mom liked, and she had assisted with clearing the table at family dinners without being asked. However, I wasn't prepared for the cultural differences. During conversations on politics or current affairs, she would remain silent, not because she didn't have thoughts, but rather because she was considering the possibility that sharing them would somehow wind up in a file. I witnessed her expression shutting down as if someone had switched a switch as my uncle made his customary comments about immigrants during Thanksgiving. She later informed me that she had wondered if he was the kind to report things anonymously throughout the remainder of the lunch. The future turned into a genuine discussion about the type of night people post about, and the scent of dryer vent and warm June air that smelled like cooked corn. We were chit-chatting about battery storage on my friend Jake's rooftop. Lean spoke so softly that I nearly missed it. "I'm not interested in going." Between us hung the balloon of a sentence. I gave her a knee squeeze and assured her that we would work things out. The term marriage was first mentioned in the conversation at that point. As a solution, not as a joke. It's not a ring and flower solution. A workable legal immigration solution. She refrained from pushing. I made no commitment. When faced with significant, recalcitrant issues, we did what couples do. We covered them with bandages. We looked at sponsorship pages for businesses. Spreadsheets were created by us. We contacted a lawyer who sounded like a funeral director and another who sounded like the host of a game show. She detested having a transactional feeling. I detested the possibility that a love story would need a notary stamp. It has to be real if we do it, she stated. People won't roll their eyes at my story. The meetings with the law firm were instructive in the saddest way imaginable. Mr. Morrison, the first attorney, had an office that reeked of defeat and stale coffee. He clarified that marriage-based applications were being scrutinized more and more, and that couples needed to demonstrate the legitimacy of their relationship with joint bank accounts, leasing agreements, years' worth of images, and testimonies from friends and relatives. The interview process, which might take up to 2 years, asked questions about everything from brand preferences to sleeping positions. He handed a retainer agreement over his desk and stated, "The government assumes you're lying. It is your responsibility to use documentation to disprove them." Miss Chun, the second attorney, was more upbeat but not more hopeful. The message was the same even if her office had greater lighting and healthy plants. The procedure was costly, intrusive, and prone to failure for reasons unrelated to the genuineness of the partnership. She clarified that even lawful couples are turned down. Sometimes the timing is off. It's poor luck sometimes. Occasionally, it's a tough day for a cop. There are no assurances. After both encounters, we felt as though we had been blindfolded and given instructions on how to defuse a bomb. Come on over to the work party. Lean was employed by a boutique design company that created experiential brand spaces and pop-up retail build-outs, which I believe are elegant for spaces that smell like a particular candle and entice you to purchase pricey sneakers. This warehouse area, which is actually a bar with better lighting but poses as a gallery, was where they were hosting their winter party. You've seen them all if you've been to one. Selfie neon sign. DJ who knows just how to perform a song baila. A grapefruit-flavored craft beer lost a battle with a pine tree. Instead of coming up with a slightly different approach to showcase handbags, everyone was celebrating the company's huge deal with a national shop as if they had cured cancer. After working on the project for 60 weeks, Lean returned home with ink stains on her fingers and that unique weariness that comes from being creative on demand. The typical mix of overconfident 26-year-olds and seasoned professionals who dressed like they were still 26 made up her co-workers. They all had strong opinions on fonts and used marketing language while speaking. With the exception of Madison, most of the people I'd met at past occasions were innocuous, though I couldn't recall their names. Madison was among those who saw social networking as a full-time profession. Despite having only about 800 followers, she posted like an influencer, replete with branded hashtags and ring lights. She kept a record of everything. Her ideas on seasonal color schemes, her songs for her workouts, and her daily coffee regimen. The type of person who would record herself sobbing if she believed it would result in an engagement. I enjoyed myself. For the first time since my cousin's wedding, I donned a blazer and managed to keep it clean. When I first met Lean's supervisors, they were all dressed in black turtlenecks, as if they were uniforms. The new year was toasted. A conga line was ironic at first, but it became less ironic. Madison made the decision to broadcast an Instagram live party recap at around 11. The type is familiar to you, carrying her phone about and getting people to comment on her material. She was inquiring about everyone's goals for the coming year, their greatest achievements from the previous year, their aspirations, and their favorite pizza toppings. People were inebriated enough to cooperate. She aimed the camera at me and Lean. I put an arm over Lean and made a bland comment about exploring new places. Lean rolled her eyes, tucked her hair behind her ear, and laughed in a way that suggested she was acting a little. "I'm only dating him for the green card," she whispered, leaning into the phone. God, I can replay this with the audio burned in. It was a joke, similar to how a loaded rifle on a table is a prop in the first act. Americans are so naive. Madison laughed as if she had won the TikTok crown diamond. The air around me changed like heat from a highway. The man near the speakers went, "Aye," and pumped his fist. Other individuals turned to observe. Some were uneasy, while others laughed. I felt chilly on my fingers as I stood there with my lips slightly open. After giving me a sidelong glance, Lean said, "Kidding, kidding." Madison, who had already uploaded the video to her account, raised both hands and remarked, "Savage," and moved on to the next ring light target. Lean then joked. She gave my hand a squeeze. My body had muscle memory for her, which is why I squeezed back. My mind was racing barefoot down a dimly lit corridor, attempting to locate the door with the light behind it. The fact that cramped quarters exacerbate suffering made the ride home tense. The Uber driver was listening to a late-night talk show on the radio, where people were complaining about their neighbors. Lean was already frantically texting Madison about erasing the video while she sat with her phone out. I attempted to figure out why I felt like I had been punched in the chest as I watched the city pass by the window. She remarked, not taking her eyes off her screen, "It was just a dumb joke. I don't think of you that way, you know." I answered, "I know, but I wasn't positive." The joke had flowed so smoothly and effortlessly, as if she had already thought of it. The words themselves weren't the worst part. It was the ease with which she had uttered them. "Madison says she'll delete it," she continued, displaying the text message to me. However, Madison's answer was ambiguous. "It was hilarious, but if you really want me to, I'll do it." When we returned to my place, we argued in soft, worn-out sentences. "You know, when people don't know you, they don't see the italics," I said. "You know, I don't think of you that way," she remarked. I mentioned that the immigration issues were already hard enough without jokes that could be misinterpreted. She expressed her frustration at having to be cautious when responding to every casual remark. Sitting on my couch with her knees pulled up, she remarked, "I can't police every word that comes out of my mouth." I was trying to be funny. That's not something you joke about when you're actually going through it. But I was trying to blend in with folks who make jokes about everything. "That's like making jokes about having cancer while undergoing chemotherapy," I remarked. After that, she remained silent for a considerable amount of time. We fell asleep with our backs facing each other, but not quite touching, and the video remained up for 4 hours, which was sufficient. I was unaware that ICC accounts could appear like any other account, and I was unaware of the precise individuals who scroll through the exact hashtags that correspond with work events, visas, life, architecture, and jokes about immigrants. According to the metrics Madison later showed me, the video received 312 views on social media, but it went viral in a federal sense when someone flagged it, opened a file, or entered our names into a database. Lean's Instagram account was public, and she used hashtags like #Optife, #ImmigrantJourney, and #Visa Processing in previous posts. The party video appeared in a feed alongside other content tagged with immigration-related keywords, which might have appeared to a casual observer as a sincere confession rather than a poorly timed joke. It appears that the algorithm that determines what federal agents see is not all that different from the one that determines which ads follow you around the internet. 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday, I was at work retrieving a granola bar from my desk when Lean sent me a message asking if I could talk, with the sort of punctuation that looks like handshaking. I called. She was crying without the dramatic inhale, the way people cry when they're skipping to the part where breathing is optional. "They're at the office," she said. "They're asking questions. I'm not a speeding guy, but every red light felt like a personal failure. I parked poorly and ran into an atrium where 2 agents in windbreakers looked exactly like they do on TV. They were courteous, exhausted, and carrying the complete opposite of a selfie ring light. She was trying to sound like she had authority inside it. Maybe the asking was something she could handle if she used the right professional voice. By the time I arrived, they had already finished being courteous. Lean's face was blotchy and chalk white. Her boss was pale and hovering, obviously calculating how this would affect the firm's reputation. Madison was sitting in the principal's office in a chair with her knees locked together like a child, her phone nowhere to be seen for once. An agent asked me to confirm my name and whether I was the boyfriend in question. I replied that I was. They also asked if we lived together. When they asked if Lean had ever explicitly stated that she was with me to obtain permanent residency, the truth was that she was sitting in the room with us on a 5.4-inch screen framed in rose gold plastic. The agent held up the phone like a priest with a wafer, and Madison turned over her phone without hesitation. Mostly, yes. And if we had ever discussed marriage, we had, like normal, like everyone does, like it's not a felony to talk about your future. If there's a way to persuade a professional listener that the worst possible version of a sentence was the least true, we didn't find it in that atrium under those pendant lights with a neon "happens here" sign winking pink in the corner. Lean kept saying it was a joke, then a bad joke, and then I didn't mean it like that until the sentences became a single exhausted chord. You can come down to Federal Building Exit Y, they stated, taking her for an interview. We love each other. We were planning to marry eventually. She's not a fraud. She's a person who is afraid of a clock. If you've never sat in a waiting room designed for people in trouble, it has a sound. I drove behind the car and practiced sentences in my head like there would be an exam with the tone of people who say this 100 times a week. I sat next to a man who kept checking his watch and a woman who was crying so quietly that I wasn't sure she was crying until I saw the tissues piled up in her purse. The building itself felt designed to make you feel small. The air conditioner is a little too loud. The vending machine is always humming. Every chair has a story trapped in it. The fabric is peeled to hell. Everyone who works there is efficient in a way that makes you grateful and furious at the same time. The agent on Lean's interview had a voice like a DMV line. I watched people come and go through the metal detectors, trying to read their faces for clues about how these conversations usually ended. The fluorescent lighting made everyone look sick. Security checkpoints reminded you that this was a place where the government decided who belonged and who didn't. After 2 hours, they called me back. He asked me questions like, what side of the bed does she sleep on? What brand of toothbrush does she use? And what's the name of her aunt who sent her that birthday card with the pressed flowers? That you might be prepared for if you had researched the marriage fraud interview BuzzFeed quiz beforehand. The questions seemed haphazardly specific until I realized that the point isn't the answers, but rather how you know them. I answered all of the questions correctly because I did know her. I knew she used the purple Oral-B toothbrush because she had purchased a 2-pack and given me the blue one. I knew her Aunt Carmen's handwriting because Lean had shown me the card, laughing about how the pressed flowers had made her homesick for her grandmother's garden. And then came the bigger, colder question. I also knew she slept on the right side because she preferred being near the window. We had discussed the visa and had drawn outlines around the solution, but the word primarily is a guillotine with grammar on it. I said we had discussed marriage in the context of our life together. Had she ever told me, directly or indirectly, that marriage to me would be primarily for immigration status? Everything in me wanted to say no, not because it was totally true. They held her, not overnight, a hold that sounds like a coffee shop order, but is actually a 12-hour legal silhouette that allows them to draw lines around next steps. I explained that we understood it had immigration consequences, but that it wasn't the point. He nodded without writing anything, which felt worse than if he had been taking notes. She called me from a room with linoleum that had scuffs you could map, saying sorry so many times that the word frayed. I could hear other voices in the background, other people making similar calls to loved ones who were unable to assist them. Madison erased the video that evening, but not before multiple people had screen recorded it. The clip persisted in group chats and text message threads, circulating like evidence in a case we were unaware we were involved in. Her coworker shared a black square that read, "Be careful what you joke about." People who hardly knew us were suddenly experts on immigration law and relationship honesty. The notice to appear took 4 weeks. It was the social media equivalent of prayers and thoughts. It was a performative worry that cost nothing and benefited no one. Since she had been staying at my apartment most nights, the legal document that summoned her to immigration court was sent to my apartment. It arrived on a Tuesday in a manila envelope that appeared to be any other piece of government mail until you opened it and saw that it was a countdown timer to deportation. In the meantime, her OPT was about to expire. Her boss attempted to play the hero and called the office of a member of Congress, but the assistant who answered the phone informed me that they couldn't get involved in active cases. We had 2 options on paper, and a lawyer with a gorgeous website took our retainer before gently telling us that a recorded admission of fraudulent intent, even if it was a joke, was gasoline in a room full of cigarettes. Intent is the dragon here, he said, spreading our case file across his conference table. They don't have to prove a sham marriage happened. They just have to believe you meant one. One option is to get married right away, file for status adjustment, fight like crazy, argue sincerity. Make it through credibility interviews, and hope that someone will think that the worst 5 seconds of sarcasm ever recorded weren't the main point of our relationship. The other option is to avoid getting married, appear in immigration court, and ask for discretion, which is rare when there's a video and a caption with 3 laughing and crying emojis. The lawyer presented the statistics. "The video is the issue," he said. "Everything else is manageable. But those words in that context with that audience are going to follow you through every interview, every hearing, and every appeal." We fought about it in circles that left us dizzy. Marriage cases with fraud allegations had about a 30% success rate, and that was before social media evidence. Court cases where the person was already in removal proceedings had even lower odds. In any case, we were looking at years of legal battles and tens of thousands of dollars in court. "If we get married now, they'll think it's for them, not for us," Lean would add. "If we don't, they'll claim there's no bond to even pretend to weigh against intent," I would say. We were as raw as wire at moments, while at other times we were silent and held hands. The inquiry, "Do you want to marry me?" It began as a romantic inquiry and turned into a legal trapdoor. It is impossible to express how corrosive it is unless you have experienced it firsthand. Our friends had different opinions. Jake believed that we should get married and fight it out in court because, as he put it, "You love each other. That's what matters. The government can't read your hearts." My sister, on the other hand, believed that we should end our relationship amicably and let Lean find another path because, as she put it, "You're both young. Don't let the government force you into something you're not ready for." Lean's friends were divided along similar lines. Those who had married American citizens. We didn't get married because we told ourselves we wouldn't allow the government to use our love as a prop. It was noble, perhaps foolish, but it felt like the only way to preserve something authentic in a process designed to strip authenticity away. Her hearing date was set. Those who were still fighting their own immigration battles said the system was too rigged to trust. Those who had given up and gone home said at least she'd know where she stood. The day before, our lawyer prepared us for 3 hours in his conference room. He said, "Answer what they ask. Don't volunteer. Don't guess. Don't get cute." He looked at me. "If they ask you whether she ever used the word green card as a reason to date or marry you, you have to tell the truth. If you lie for her and they know it, they don't just wreck her case, they wreck you. If you've never seen a docket, it looks like a spreadsheet someone bled on." I played out various versions of my testimony in my head while I stared at the ceiling that night. In some, I managed to tell the truth without sounding like a confession. In others, I lied convincingly and convinced everyone. In the worst, I told the truth and watched Lean get handcuffed in a courtroom. None of the versions ended with us going home together to argue about what to watch on Netflix. We didn't sleep. The courtroom was cold. The judge had hair that suggested she didn't have time for it. The room smelled like institutional disinfectant and old carpet. And IC counsel had the video queued on a laptop that appeared older than the relationship it was about to dissect. At last, one of my succulents gave up, leaning sideways like a tiny drunk and falling out of its pot, scattering soil across my kitchen counter like a metaphor I was too tired to unpack. Lean testified first. She was good until she wasn't, explaining the party's context, her stress levels, and her sense of humor that didn't always translate well. They played it first without volume, then with volume, then again with volume. You know how your voice sounds weird on tape? Imagine your girlfriend's worst sentence playing on a government laptop looped like a bad TikTok trend while men in suits watch your face for tells. She talked about our relationship history, our common hobbies, and our plans for the future that had nothing to do with immigration status. She made too many jokes, sobbed at the incorrect question, and declared, "I love him." When the IC counsel questioned if she would ever complain to friends about the visa clock, she replied that she would because she is honest. It sounded like a prayer that no one wanted to hear. We talked about that, and I felt the floor tilt. She said in response to the counsel's question about whether she had ever portrayed marriage as a solution to her status issue. The truth was in handcuffs, but she was saying the truth. The case made by the government was simple. She had openly acknowledged that she had dated an American citizen in order to obtain immigration benefits. The video demonstrated intent, and her testimony verified that she had discussed marriage in the context of resolving her status issue. If the main motivation was fraudulent, then everything else, genuine affection, shared experiences, and an authentic relationship, was irrelevant. Our lawyer attempted to rehabilitate her testimony on redirect, but the damage was already done. You can't unring a bell, and you can't unsay words that were recorded for future generations and federal scrutiny. When it was my turn, I put my hand on a book and vowed to tell the truth. Truth can be jealous, and God can be jealous. I don't know how to explain standing up knowing that your sentence could keep someone you love or push them out of the building into the long conveyor belt that takes you to an airport you don't want. They asked me standard relationship verification questions like, when we met, how often we fought, who cooks, who hates cilantro, whether we had a joint bank account, no joint lease, no, but a drawer full of her stuff, yes, and yes. I was honest and thorough in my responses. We met at a coffee shop in March, and we got into arguments about everyday things like dishes, temperature settings, and whether it's a crime against humanity to put ketchup on eggs. She cooked because she was better at it, and I took care of takeout orders. Neither of us disliked cilantro, but she used it in everything, and I had come to like it. We talked about opening joint accounts, but we hadn't done so because we were both cautious with money. Then, as if he were at a bar, the ICE counsel leaned on the lectern and remarked, "Mr. Did Ms. ever tell you, either verbally or implicitly, that her main reason for being with you was to get immigration benefits?" Everyone in the courtroom was staring at me, including the judge, the attorneys, and Lean, the court reporter, who was waiting for my response with her fingers poised over her keyboard. The question hung in the air like a smoke alarm going off. I could hear the ventilation system, someone's stomach growling, and my own heartbeat in my ears. If I wanted to treat words like loose change, I could have said no, never, or not once, which would have been 80% true and 20% the lie that would follow me forever like a low battery alert beeping at 3 in the morning. Or I could have said the thing that felt like stepping on a rake. I looked at Lean, whose face was pale and desperate, and I could see that she was attempting to telepathically communicate with me across the courtroom. I looked at the judge, who was waiting with the patience of someone who had heard every possible version of this conversation, and at our lawyer, whose expression was carefully neutral, but whose hand was gripping his pen like he was trying to strangle it. I said, "Sometimes I felt like our marriage would also fix her status." Our lawyer's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. Lean's face crumpled like paper, and the IC counsel looked satisfied in the way people do when a spreadsheet cell autofills the way they want it. She never said it was the only reason, but yes, she said it would fix it. The words came out steady and clear, as if I'd been practicing them, which I had in my head for days. It was the most honest version of the truth I could manage. Acknowledging the conversations are not the basis of our relationship. The government asked a few follow-up questions in an attempt to get me to elaborate on my response or offer more damaging details. But I stuck to what I had already said. Yes, we had talked about the immigration benefits of marriage. No, it wasn't stated as the main reason for our relationship. Yes, she was aware that marrying me would solve her status problem. No, I didn't believe that was her main motivation for dating me. And the judge made a note without changing her expression. The numbers fell like stones. 10 years before she could apply to return. 10 years of exile for a 5-second joke. We walked out into air that didn't feel like it belonged to us anymore. The courthouse steps were crowded with other people having other legal crises, but we moved through them like ghosts. She thanked us. The law is what it is. She said the word inadmissibility, like a librarian saying overdue. Lean didn't look at me until we got to my car, and when she did, her eyes were dry and red. "You told the truth," she said. Not angry, not surprised, just stating a fact. "I had to," I said. "I couldn't lie under oath." "I know," she said, "I know." I drove Lean to my place because hers had already turned into a box storage unit, and we didn't speak much. I made a joke, "And now my life is a suitcase," she remarked after sitting on the floor with her back to my couch and gazing at our crooked IKEA bookshelf as if it were giving a TED talk about injustice. I didn't say anything more intelligent than "I apologize." It was similar to stating, "The ocean is wet." The deportation procedure is primarily a heartbreaking logistical process. She had to make decisions about what to retain and what to leave behind, make plans to ship her goods, and make calls to her family. There were calls, forms, and her mother sobbing on a video call while adjusting the scarf around her shoulders for grief. Her parents booked a flight for her return, speaking in rapid Spanish during lengthy phone calls that I couldn't understand, but whose emotional content was unmistakable. There is a lot they don't tell you about deportation that anyone who has done any airport drop-off can guess. Her younger relatives sent a voice message on WhatsApp saying, Vove pronto in 8th grade Spanish that stabbed me clean through, while her father gently expressed his pride in her and noted that some rooms are too small for the truth. Her suitcase had a broken zipper, so I purchased a new one. She repackaged it with the efficiency of someone who can play emotional Tetris after I packed it incorrectly twice. In order to prevent confusion, we tagged everything. I printed her boarding permit and double-checked the schedules. For example, aircraft delays can be caused by a lack of respect for numbers. The city's daybreak was filled with dazzling apathy. In the car, we didn't say much. She burst out giggling at one red light. The radio had the guts to play a corny song about staying, which caused this brittle, tired laugh. She said, "The universe is rude." "It's not original," I said. We hugged at the curb. I wanted the hug to accomplish more than it can. "I'm sorry for what I said," she said, "but don't, since the phrase would be too long and incorrect in every way." She entered. I held my hands on the steering wheel of my automobile as if something might drift away if I released them. I returned home to the spiteful plant that would not die. I watered it as if everything would be all right. My friends alternately brought me food and their thoughts. My mom said, "We don't build a life on lies." My dad said, "You didn't betray her. She set fire to something, and you told the fire marshal where the gasoline was." My friend Jake said, "I would have lied," and I believed him. I also didn't think he wouldn't have when a judge with that kind of hair said under oath. A week later, Lean called from her parents' kitchen, where the tile behind her was terracotta orange. She reported that the coffee at the airport was awful, that the customs queue at home was strangely efficient, that her aunt gave her a hug that made her ribs burst, and that, "I know what you did in court." "I know," I replied. "We did the long-distance thing for precisely 9 days, not out of hope, but out of muscle memory, and we let the double meaning lurk in the corner between us. We shared playlists, fell asleep on FaceTime with our phones breathing hot under our blankets like animals, sent each other pictures of the sky as if we lived under the same one. And then both of us admitted that this was mostly pain with lipstick." The aftermath was quieter than I had anticipated, and half of the people who heard this story said, "You did what you had to do. You could have saved her," the other half responds. "I kept the blazer because it still looks good, but both sides are incorrect, or at least incomplete. The part after is quieter. It's making rice for one. It's the faint echo in a hallway where there used to be a second pair of shoes. It's dreaming that your phone vibrates and waking up to a battery at 13% and no notifications." I found Lean's sketchbook under my bed and shipped it with a letter that stated, "Keep drawing." After deleting Instagram for a month due to the noisy squares. "A place I'm not homesick in eventually," she wrote next to a picture of the page on which she had sketched the coffee shop where we first met, the door, and the goofy fern in the corner. Then, I apologized for giving us a warning. Madison made one attempt to get in touch, sending a lengthy note expressing her regret and stating that she never intended for any of this to occur. The bar is 10 years for a finding of fraud or willful misrepresentation. There are waivers, but they're threaded needles. Love is not evidence. If the government believes that the intent was incorrect from the start, we didn't get married. I read it and didn't respond. Apologies are nice, but they don't reverse deportation orders or give people back the years they lose to bad decisions. If you need me to put on the account visor and talk law, fine. I don't get to know the counterfactual. I only get to live the one we chose. Last week, a package with foreign stamps and handwriting I recognized arrived. Inside was a t-shirt from her dad's coffee farm, Cafe Dias Montanus, in a font that really tried. Maybe if we had, we would be watching Netflix in a terrible starter house with a window unit doing its best, and maybe we would be divorced because the first brick in that house would have been a lie. There was a note that said, "You told the truth, and it hurt both of us. I am trying to be a person who can live with both halves of that." Sentence. I sat at my table and made coffee with beans that smelled like mountain air and cried like an idiot because there are losses you don't get better from. You get more fluent at carrying them. I know someone will ask, "Yes, she's banned from returning for 10 years. A small bag of ground coffee that her mom roasts herself." That's the number they write when they stamp the file. It looks both too big and too small. 10 years is a long time to be a grown-up. It's also 2 Olympics, a few iPhone models, and a houseplant that will outlive your worst story. I hope hers does. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube, This video deserves to blow up. After